What drives a man to declare war on the heavens themselves? In the year 1843, in a forgotten corner of the Ottoman Empire, Emperor Hadim Rashad the Mad did exactly that. For 7 days and 7 nights, he ordered his archers to fire burning arrows into the sky, screaming challenges at God himself. 3 weeks later, lightning struck his palace 13 times in a single night. What happened next would be buried by history, hidden in Ottoman archives that few dare to open. But tonight, we're going to uncover the terrifying truth behind the emperor who thought he could defeat the sky. They say, madness runs in bloodlines like poison through water. But what happens when that madness is given absolute power over life and death? What happens when a man who believes he is divine decides that even God must bow to his will? This is the story of the most blasphemous war ever waged, and the cosmic horror that answered back. Emperor Hadim Rashad ascended to power in 1838, inheriting a small but wealthy province on the edge of the Ottoman Empire. From birth, something was wrong with Rashad. Court physicians whispered of his unusual appearance: pale skin that seemed to glow in darkness, eyes that were 2 different colors, one brown, one an unsettling pale blue that seemed almost white. His mother died giving birth to him during a solar eclipse, and the midwives claimed the child was born, not crying, but laughing. As Rashad grew, so did the whispers. Servants spoke of finding him as a child, speaking to empty rooms in languages no one recognized. Animals fled from his presence. Birds would fall dead from the sky when he walked beneath them. His tutors noted his intelligence was extraordinary, but so was his cruelty. By age 12, he was dissecting live cats to understand what he called the architecture of suffering. When Rashad became emperor at 25, his first act was to have his entire family executed. Not just killed, he ordered them flayed alive and their skins tanned to make the binding for his personal diary. In this diary, he wrote daily letters to God, challenging the Almighty to contests of power and will. The diary still exists, locked away in Istanbul, and those few scholars who have read it claim it drove them to madness. But Rashad's true obsession was the sky. He believed that heaven was a physical place that could be conquered through force. He spent vast sums of his treasury constructing what he called skybreakers, massive catapults, designed to launch projectiles beyond the clouds. He imprisoned astronomers and forced them to map what he called the weak points in heaven's defenses. The breaking point came during the summer of 1843. Rashad's newest wife, a young woman named Layla, died suddenly after giving birth to a stillborn child. But here's where the story becomes truly horrifying. Rashad refused to accept her death. He had her body dressed and seated at his dining table every night, carrying on conversations with her rotting corpse for weeks. It was during one of these macabre dinner conversations that Rashad claimed Layla's spirit spoke to him. She told him that God had stolen her soul and imprisoned it in the sky. This was the final insult that drove Rashad over the edge into complete madness. On the night of July 13, 1843, Emperor Rashad assembled every archer in his army in the palace courtyard. Over 300 men stood with their bows ready, arrows wrapped in cloth and soaked in oil. As the sun set, Rashad climbed to the highest tower of his palace, dressed in robes of pure white. Witnesses described his appearance as otherworldly. His skin seemed to emit its own light, and his mismatched eyes glowed like coals at the stroke of midnight. Rashad raised his arms and screamed a challenge that could be heard for miles. Heaven, I am Rashad the Undying. You have taken what belongs to me. I hereby declare war upon your realm. Send down your angels, your demons, your gods themselves. I will destroy them all and take back what is mine. The archers fired. 300 flaming arrows arced into the night sky like falling stars in reverse. But Rashad wasn't finished. For 7 days and 7 nights, the volleys continued. The emperor slept only 1 hour each day, spending the rest of his time screaming curses at the heavens and ordering wave after wave of burning arrows into the darkness. The local population fled in terror. Even his most loyal soldiers began to desert. Those who remained described increasingly disturbing phenomena. The palace began to smell of sulfur and decay. Shadows moved on their own, independent of any light source. The temperature around the palace dropped 20 degrees. Even though it was midsummer. On the seventh night, something answered. Witnesses described the sky above the palace turning an unnatural shade of green. Stars began to move, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. Then came the sound, a low humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once, growing louder until it became a roar that shattered windows and drove men to their knees in agony. The attack stopped. Rashad had finally exhausted his supply of arrows and his army. He retreated to his chambers, claiming victory and announcing he would await heaven's surrender. For 3 weeks, an eerie calm settled over the palace. The servants who hadn't fled reported that Rashad spent this time writing furiously in his diary, filling page after page with text in those same unknown languages he had spoken as a child. Then came the night of August 15th. At exactly 3 a.m, lightning struck the palace. Not ordinary lightning, this was something else entirely. The bolts came in perfect geometric patterns, striking 13 specific points on the palace simultaneously. Each strike lasted exactly 13 seconds, and between strikes, witnesses claimed to hear voices speaking in harmony. Though no one could understand the words, the lightning continued for 3 hours. When it finally stopped, search parties found the palace transformed. Every piece of metal had been twisted into impossible spirals. Every mirror and window had melted and reformed into shapes that resembled screaming faces. The palace walls were covered in symbols that seemed to move when viewed directly. They found Rashad in his chambers, seated at his writing desk. His diary was open before him, the final entry written in what appeared to be his own blood. The entry consisted of a single line, repeated over and over in increasingly shaky handwriting. They heard me, they heard me, they heard me. But here's the truly terrifying part. Rashad was still alive. The lightning had somehow fused him to his chair. His body was charred and twisted, but his mismatched eyes still moved, following anyone who entered the room. His mouth moved constantly, but no sound emerged except for a soft whispering that drove listeners mad. The Ottoman authorities sealed the palace immediately. They declared Rashad officially dead and forbade anyone from entering the ruins. But local villagers reported that for years afterward, on clear nights, they could see lights moving in the sealed palace windows. They claimed that if you listened carefully, you could still hear the emperor whispering his challenges to the sky. The palace stood as a monument to madness for 67 years. In 1910, the Ottoman government finally ordered its destruction. The demolition crew reported numerous disturbing incidents. Tools would disappear and reappear in impossible locations. Workers claimed to see a figure in white robes watching them from windows that had been bricked over. 3 workers suffered complete mental breakdowns and had to be institutionalized. When they reached Rashad's chambers, they found something that defied explanation. The chair was empty, but perfectly preserved. The diary remained on the desk, still open to that final blood-written entry, but now there was something new. Fresh writing in the same unknown language Rashad had used as a child. The ink still wet, despite 67 years of abandonment. The demolition was completed, but the site remained cursed. Nothing would grow. On the land where the palace once stood, animals avoided the area completely. Local villagers reported that on certain nights, especially during thunderstorms, they could still see the outline of the palace appearing like a phantom against the sky. The diary was sent to Istanbul, where it resides today in a sealed vault beneath the Topkapi Palace. According to classified Ottoman records that surfaced in the 1970s, the diary continues to write itself. New entries appear regularly, always in that same unknown language, always written in what appears to be human blood. Modern scholars who have attempted to translate the language claim it's not of human origin. The few partial translations that exist suggest the entries are reports, military dispatches describing an ongoing war between earth and heaven. Written from the perspective of someone claiming to be Rashad, the undying emperor of the space between worlds. So what really happened to Emperor Hadim Rashad the Mad? Did his arrows actually reach heaven? Did something cosmic and terrible answer his challenge? The official records claim he died in a lightning strike, victim of his own madness. But the evidence suggests something far more disturbing. Perhaps Rashad succeeded in ways he never imagined. Perhaps his war with heaven didn't end with those 13 lightning strikes. Perhaps it simply moved to a different battlefield, one that exists in the spaces between reality. The Ottoman Empire tried to bury this story, to pretend it never happened. But the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when that truth is written in blood by hands that should have crumbled to dust decades ago. The next time you see lightning during a thunderstorm, remember Emperor Rashad. Remember the man who declared war on the sky itself. And if you ever find yourself in Istanbul, walking near the Topkapi Palace on a stormy night, listen carefully to the thunder. Some say that if you know what to listen for, you can still hear the emperor's voice carried on the wind, still issuing his eternal challenge to the heavens above. But be careful what you listen for, because sometimes, when you call out to the darkness, something calls back. And sometimes, that something has been waiting centuries for someone foolish enough to answer. The war between earth and sky may have begun with Rashad, but according to that diary that still writes itself in the darkness beneath Istanbul, the war is far from over. And every lightning strike, every bolt that reaches down from heaven to earth, might just be another battle in a conflict that began with one mad emperor's arrows and will only end when the sky itself falls. Sweet dreams.